So, yesterday, if you recall, I was talking about President Donald Trump's State of the Union address and how he made it, in my opinion, evidently clear to the Democrats and perhaps even to the deep state that the only thing that can stop this economic miracle that's taking place in the U.S., according to Donald Trump, are endless wars, politics, and endless partisan investigations. Well, we know only a day later, which would have been on Wednesday, a group of Democrats came out and said, "So sad, too bad, Mr. President. We're going to continue with these investigations." And in fact, because you made such a statement during the State of the Union, you must have only made that statement because you're hiding something. Therefore, we must investigate and continue to investigate wherever any lead, any allegation, any speculation leads us. So the president got to Twitter and said the following. So now Congressman Adam Schiff announces, after having found zero Russian collusion, that he is going to be looking at every aspect of my life, both financial and personal, even though there is no reason to be doing so. Never happened before. Unlimited presidential harassment. He continues, the Dems and their committees are going nuts. The Republicans never did this to President Obama. There would be no time left to run government. I hear other committee heads will do the same thing, even stealing people who work at White House, a continuation of the witch hunt. You said it, Mr. President. The only thing I would disagree with is when you said the Dems and their committees are going nuts. No, sir, they are nuts. They have been nuts. They have been insane for a long time. They are off their rockers. They are beyond the deep end. I told you the other day that Trump derangement syndrome is a real condition. They all suffer from it. It is maddening. It is insanity. There are not enough drugs in this world, and God knows there are a lot of drugs in this world, to snap these people out of it. Their obsession with this president is unbelievable. Unbelievable. You can watch daytime talk shows. You can watch nighttime news, mainstream media. You can watch comedy TV. You can watch the late night shows. You can watch pundits on HBO. The list goes on and on and on. And all they talk about, and all they have been talking about for 3 years since this man was candidate Trump, has been Donald J. Trump. It's an obsession. It is entirely unhealthy. Yet these are the same people who think socialism's a good idea too, so I guess they're at least consistently in the wrong direction. I'll give them credit for that. Finally, we found something they're consistent at. Being wrong, being nuts. I so wish that wasn't the case, but all you have to do is turn on the television, and it's one after the other. It's MSNBC, pundit after pundit. Lawrence O'Donnell, Rachel Maddow, Al Sharpton. CNN, Anderson Cooper. Late night talk show. It just goes on and on and on. It does not serve this country well. At all. I'm all for the First Amendment, clearly. I do these podcasts. I voice my opinions. I'm not saying they can't say what they're saying. Far from it. I defend their right to say it. I just wish they would tone it down. There's more important things to talk about. If you're going to be obsessed with solving problems, not complaining about a man you don't like. I personally thought this little game was just going to be a game and it would have ran out of steam maybe last year. No, it's picking up steam. It just keeps going. They just do not stop with this president. I said it the other day. How he gets up and keeps moving is a miracle. God bless him. Because it's not just him. They attack his family. They attack his associates. Anybody that shook his hand. Even if it was people they agree with who shook his hand. Well, that was just a mistake. We really didn't know who he was. Blah, blah, blah. Unbelievable. Never seen anything like it. In my early 30s, been following politics probably since I was, 12, 13 years old. Never seen anything like it. It is a sickness. But the man keeps moving, and that's all you can do. He says it all the time, never, ever give up. He lives by those words. That's his credo. He keeps moving. And those who support him should keep moving. So this is an article out of the Washington Post, which also highlighted the tweets that I just read you from Donald Trump. In addition to that, we've had other comments made from Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. She says the following. I always think that whatever the president says about us, he's projecting his own unruliness. He's a projector. And that's what it's all about. Even the Republicans have complimented the committees on being wise in how they proceed in terms of subpoenas and the rest. She continues, we will not surrender our constitutional responsibility for oversight. That would make us delinquent in our duties. I repeat, that would make us delinquent in our duties. Give me a break. We have $22 trillion in debt in the United States of America. This woman has been in office for years. She's responsible for that. How is that not being delinquent of your duties? You have voted for endless wars. You have voted for programs that take people's rights away, limit their abilities to succeed for no good reason other than you think you know best. How is that, Madam Speaker, not being delinquent in your duties? These people are amazing. And don't get me wrong. This is on both sides of the aisle. But of late, it has been the Democrats who have just been feeding us more and more ammunition to go against them. The hypocrisy, the delusions, Trump derangement syndrome, socialism, democratic socialism, whatever the hell that means. I guess you get to vote for the insanity. Well, thanks, Bernie. I get to vote for an economic, political system that robs me of my rights, robs me of my property, robs me of my money, and robs me of opportunities to be successful, unless, of course, I'm joined at the hip with you and we become more equal than others. No thanks, I'll pass. Stay in Vermont. Do us all a favor. Now we have Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC. She must think she is FDR reincarnated with her new Green Deal. I'm not even going to get started on this. on this podcast because this is more of the economic news podcast. I want to focus on the earlier podcast today had to deal with Brexit, so that was sort of the political, geopolitical news. So I'm not even going to go down that rabbit hole for the Green New Deal, but I will discuss that at a later time. But I did just want to keep everybody abreast of that news where Adam Schiff is going to continue his investigations as he said he would. Other committees are going to do so. Nancy Pelosi is out there supporting and defending her fellow Democrats on that mission. Now, just so you're all aware, some of this is going into the man's, of course, his taxes. That story is just never going to end. But they also want to look into his inauguration committee. This is where the man gets dressed up in a tuxedo. Everybody wonders what the First Lady is going to be wearing, and they go and they dance at a few balls. Give me a break. Give us all a break. We have $22 trillion in debt. We have Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security in crisis. Nobody talks about these things, not even the president, not even the Republicans. Let's just keep skipping down the road. More important to talk about Russians and this president. No collusion, none whatsoever. That's probably what we're going to find with the Mueller investigation once they release their report. But who cares? I mean, what else do we have to do? We might as well investigate the guy. I mean, we've only been doing it for 3 years, found nothing, but, let's just spend the taxpayers' dollars on this. Let's just keep going. Because it's not our money. It's your money. It's my money. It's not theirs. It's sickening. It's coming to a boil. And how the speaker wants to say that the president is projecting. No. Quite the contrary. I think there's going to be quite the 180 on all of these investigations and on all of these investigators. On some pretty big names. On James Comey, former FBI director. John Brennan, former CIA director. And many, many others involved in deep state activity in the Clinton State Department, in the Eric Holder / Loretta Lynch Justice Department, in the Comey FBI, in Brennan's CIA, and in confidants very close to President Obama himself. If you follow Dan Bongino and his podcast, and I advise that you do, he does great work on this spider web of this rabbit hole of all of these connections. Makes you scratch your head. Makes you wonder how all of the Republicans and anybody who is faintly associated with Donald Trump gets charged, tried, and convicted of crimes, yet if you're a Democrat or associated with the Democrats, it's free reign. I don't think that's going to be the case in the not too distant future. Talk about fireworks. Stay tuned. So, leaving the political arena and going to more of an economic one, let's go back across the pond to the UK, where we had some news come from the Bank of England, which is their central bank akin to our Federal Reserve. And this is an article from The Guardian. Let me read you a few paragraphs. The Bank of England has warned the economy is on course for its weakest year since the global financial crisis, as evidence suggests Brexit jitters are spreading from companies to companies. In its latest quarterly health check, the bank cut its growth forecast for 2019 from 1.7 to 1.2%, blaming a slowing global economy as well as Brexit uncertainty for the sharp downward revision, and said there was a 25% chance of a recession this year. Its gloomier forecast assumed the UK's departure from the EU in 7 weeks goes smoothly. If the prediction comes true, it would be the slowest growth since the economy contracted by 4.2% in 2009 during the financial crisis. If the departure from the EU goes smoothly. I don't know about that one. I don't know if that's going to be a good prediction. Check out the previous podcast, Brexit Deal or No Deal. See if you think that that's going to end and go smoothly. I hope for everybody's sake that it does, that businesses and individuals can know what's going to happen, or at least have a good idea of what's going to happen. But I'm skeptical of that. Check that podcast out, find out why. The article continues with Mark Carney, the bank's governor, when he said, quote, "The fog of Brexit is causing short-term volatility in the economic data, and more fundamentally, it's creating a series of tensions." End quote. The bank's 9-member Monetary Policy Committee, MPC, voted unanimously to keep interest rates at 0.75% and scaled back the number of increases in borrowing costs needed to meet the government's 2% inflation target to 1/4 percentage point rise in the next 2 years. Unbelievable. Yet not really if you pay attention to this podcast. I told you, these central bankers don't work for the people. They work for their governments. They work for financial institutions. There is not a global tightening that is taking place, despite some of the rhetoric. It's either a pause, wait and see, or as we'll see here shortly, it's monetary easing. I talk quite a bit about the global economy and how it's slowing down, how I don't believe the U.S. economic miracle. We are in one of the longest expansionary times in U.S. economic history, and in a few short months, if we technically don't enter a recession, it will be. So we are getting closer and closer to the 9th inning. Some think we're already in it. We're definitely in the 8th or 9th inning, in my opinion, of this business cycle and other cycles that exist and are overlapping. You usually see a business cycle run anywhere from 7 to 10 years. Well, we're going on the 10th year here. And if you look at stock charts, if you look at the broader indices, if you look at the S&P 500, if you look at the Dow, if you look at the NASDAQ, and if you look at the Russell 2000, you don't have to be a chartist or a technician. You don't have to be an economist or a market analyst. Just look at that graph over, just say, like the last 20 years to give you some perspective. And you see the exponential growth that has occurred in these markets. And then ask yourself, well, is it more likely to continue on this trajectory, or is it more likely to reverse? Now, I think if you're a fair-minded individual and objective about it, you're more likely to say it's going to reverse. Because most things don't just shoot straight up. Yet that's what's happened with a lot of these stock prices, with a lot of these indices. How much longer can it be sustained? This is why the Federal Reserve is in the process of doing a 180 from increasing interest rates and embarking and in continuing on quantitative tightening to now let's wait and see what happens. To, as I said yesterday, according to former Fed Chairman Janet Yellen, the Fed's next move may be an actual interest rate cut. So there's a lot going on here. So now if we continue our journey around the world and go to the Reserve Bank of India, they made a surprise move. So here's an article from FT, the Financial Times. The Reserve Bank of India cut its benchmark interest rate by 25 basis points on Thursday, a move likely to please Prime Minister Modi as he makes a final push for faster economic growth ahead of an upcoming parliamentary election. There you go, folks. I thought all of these central banks were supposed to be independent of the government. Whoops! The Reserve Bank of India cut rates to push for faster economic growth ahead of an election. Who would have guessed that one? It would be unbelievable if it wasn't so predictable. The article continues. The RBI, that's the Reserve Bank of India Monetary Policy Committee, cut its benchmark repo rates to 6.25%, citing slowing economic growth and sharply lower inflation. The committee also changed its monetary policy stance to neutral from the previous outlook of calibrated tightening, suggesting there was room for future cuts. Okay, so let me explain some of this to you in the context of asset allocation and where some people have been stating that a good place to invest at this time is in emerging markets, which, if you remember the BRIC countries, that would be Brazil, Russia, India, and China, that's where a lot of people think that you should invest right now. Because given how developed markets are stumbling after the correction in bear market territory of late last year, and with a weaker U.S. dollar, there might be some better opportunities in these emerging markets. Now, of course, these emerging markets are levered to the hilt with debt too, but if you have a weaker dollar, the theory and the belief goes, well, it's not going to be as painful for these foreign countries to pay off those debts because if you have a weaker dollar, it would be relative to their home currency. So now they would need fewer of their home domestic currency to pay off those dollar-denominated debts. Well, I can kind of see that, but you really have to have a Goldilocks market for that to be successful, meaning not too hot, not too cold. It would have to be just right. I think for the first month of the year, January, we've seen sort of that position where you've had a lot of the emerging markets beyond just the BRIC nations outperform some of the U.S. market broader indices. But if you continue with the belief, as I do, that the global economy is going to continue to slow, and perhaps quite drastically over the next couple of years, then I don't know how this can be a good thing for emerging markets, because emerging markets typically don't sustain themselves from domestic consumption and investment. It comes much more from an exporting-driven growth. And of course, they would be selling their commodities or agricultural goods to other nations, mainly developed nations. Well, if those nations are in economic distress, there's not going to be a lot of demand for those commodities. And even if there is, the price of those commodities is going to go down because the demand has dropped. So I don't think that that trade is going to turn out to be that favorable unless you enter a Goldilocks situation. But I don't give a lot of weight to that occurring. Of course, I could be wrong. It's always good to be diversified. I don't argue with that. But there are a lot of people who think that that's going to be the winning bet going forward. I think all that does is really just pushes you further out on the risk curve, and you just may not see any return on that investment. But do your homework. Don't just take my word for it. There's no doubt that there's a lot of good companies, I'm sure, with solid balance sheets, cash flow. You can make money anywhere. You just got to look for it. So, continuing with some economic news, here at home in the U.S., the Dow went down, the S&P dropped, NASDAQ fell, and so did the Russell 2000. They all fell from anywhere from about around 1% to a little over 1%, depending on the index. A lot of what drove this decline in markets today were discussions or comments made by White House economic advisor Larry Kudlow when he said that China and the U.S. were still far away on striking a trade deal. He said, quote, "We've got a pretty sizable distance to go here." So given all of the back and forth that we've heard since the beginning of the year, a lot of breadcrumbs being dropped. Oh yeah, I think there's going to be a deal. I think the Chinese and the U.S. they're finally going to do it, and then nothing happens. Markets go up, of course. Buy the rumor, sell the fact. Then the next week happens. Oh yeah, there's another breadcrumb. I think the Chinese and the Americans are going to do it. I think we're getting somewhere. Buy the rumor, sell the fact. Markets again go up. So over the course of January, you had President Trump come out with his buy the dips recommendation. Markets rallied 1,000 points. That might even have been in late December. You had Fed Chair Jay Powell come out, do damage control, say, oh, no, I didn't mean what I said all those other times where we're going to do quantitative tightening on autopilot. We're going to continue to increase interest rates. No, I didn't mean that. You guys, come on, you know I was joking. And so the markets like that because the addicts got their fix. And I think that day the markets went up another 600 or 800 points. So just on those two comments alone from a president and a Federal Reserve chairman, we got 1,800 points back. Then you count all of the breadcrumbs on this U.S.-China trade deal, and there's probably another 1,000 to 1,500 points. And mind you, a lot of this is on low volume. Well, what does that mean? It means there's not a lot of conviction behind this buying that has driven this market up so quickly in such a short period of time. So it's becoming rather interesting. I believe we have another delegation going to China this week or next week to continue the talks. It was also confirmed today that President Trump will not meet with President Xi of China before the March 1st deadline, which pretty much guarantees or solidifies in everybody's mind that we do remain miles and miles apart, as was the quote from Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross not too long ago. And if you recall during the State of the Union address just on Tuesday, while the president did note the trade talks, he didn't go into great detail. So I would have to imagine a man who really likes to tout making a deal and having prominent members of his cabinet administration come out and say, we're miles and miles away, And the fact that he and President Xi are not going to meet before the March 1st deadline, it tells me we are miles and miles away. So the question then becomes, if no deal is reached, will the additional tariffs be placed on Chinese goods, and will the Chinese retaliate in kind? That'll throw the markets into a tizzy. We might see another 10% drop like it's nothing. Even if there is a deal, it could be a case of buy the rumor, sell the fact. So how long-lived any type of rally may exist? Could be very short-lived. Who knows? It could be another month. Like I said, these markets are acting very crazily. But I would have to say, if no deal is reached and tariffs are implemented, that the markets will not like that at all. And we will probably see another serious step back, maybe even a retest of the lows, which from a technical standpoint wouldn't be a surprise either. If history is any guide, there's a lot of times where you have a major pullback, a recovery, and then a retest to see if that bottom becomes support or if markets break through it and make new lows. We're sort of right at that crossroads right now where these markets are trading around their 200-day moving average, which could be acting as resistance. So we'll keep an eye on it. Stay tuned. Central bankers are going to continue to print money around the world. I didn't even get into Australia. I'll have to save that for another day. There's just so much going on. Keep your eyes open. Stay tuned. I'll do my best to keep you all updated. Thanks for joining me. This is the Capital News. I am Alex Karitis, and Godspeed.